But yeah, my hat's off to you, John. This is a fantastic library, and therefore I deputize you with the power of the stash.
I must admit that I'm not really a flute guy. I don't hate flutes, but they're not really my go-to instrument. Obviously, the feathered flute sounds like a flute, but when I was making this and tweaking all the sounds, I wanted to give you something that sounds just as human as it does otherworldly. Last week, I released the feathered flute. It works with a free contact player. It's 20% off for a limited time. It's part of the new Artist Initiative. Really cool. Very grateful for the support so far. You've heard me talk about this for a long time. There might be flute fatigue for both of us. So I asked my incredibly talented friends, I can't believe how good they are at what they do, to take the flute and write something contextual in their own style and see if they could work it into the way that they like to compose. Now look, they're not going to say anything bad. They didn't say anything bad. We all know how this works. But the music that they made, I think it speaks for itself. In an effort to feature their music a little more, I'm going to weave in some of the drone footage that I shot for the promotional material for this video. I shot so much of it, I've got to find a use for it. But I think the pretty pictures of lakes and rivers and birds really goes well with the music that they wrote. I'll be sure and link to all the composers in the description so you can go learn more about them. We'll start off with my friend Peter Mowry.
I'm always searching for that type of sonic pad, dream-like, just fill in a nice atmospheric sound. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. You have the feathering effect in there, which again, I said this before, but it's essentially getting the John Mayer taste. It has your preference for, oh, this would be a nice reverb delay effect to put on this sound. So right off the bat, it's like, oh, I don't have to do that. I can just, John has good taste. I'm gonna do what he has chosen here and it sounds amazing. You can dial it back, which is really great. I think I've used every sound in that sample library in one way or another already. Everything has value. You know, a lot of times I'll have a sample pack or sample library that I end up using like a quarter of the sounds, and the other ones I'm like, eh. But this one, every single one, I was like, yep. You know, I had ideas for it right away. So good job. Really well done putting that together. And I have no doubt that we'll be hearing a lot of those sounds in songs to come.
Next up, the great Dan Keane.
Hi, my name's Dan Keane. I'm a composer, producer and musician based in London, and I'm incredibly proud of the work that John has done on the Feathered Flute. I think it's really difficult for composers to create commercial samples that they can sell to other people, because so often when we make sounds, we make them specifically for our little niche, and I think it's difficult to make a sound that not only suits that, but is also going to bed in really well with other people's styles. And when I opened this beta for the first time, I was really inspired, not to write in the style of John, but to write in my own style. There's a really nice blend between the organic parts and the slightly more ethereal layers, and actually I tend to move towards the ethereal parts much more than I thought I was going to. I tend to use the chatter layer and I'll tune it down by about an octave, and then I'll put it through a nice stereo chorus plugin or a bit of flanging or something, and I find that this beds in really well with various drones and soundscapes that I'm using. Because it's quite a hybrid library, it is a flute, but it can sound not like a flute as well. I think it blends really well into pretty much any type of score that you might be writing, whether it's something more organic and natural or something a little bit more otherworldly and textural. I think there's something also really magical about the sound of air passing through an instrument. There's something really human about that. And because John has performed this in a really intentional way, I don't really have to do much with the programming to make this sound realistic. I can just trigger his recording, his performance, and I think that's really moving.
Next up, we have Hunter Rogerson. If you're familiar at all with the piano book community, you know who he is. He made the GUI for Global Swarm, and he made the GUI for the Feathered Flute. He's equally talented at Blender and Photoshop, and he's an amazing composer, and I love what he did with the sound on this track.
Okay, so I've got to admit to you, when you first sent me the Feathered Flute to fiddle around with, I pretty much stuck in standalone Kontakt world. So when I went to write this demo, this was the first time I actually tried to pull a composition out of this library, which, as I think a lot of us know, you learn a lot about a library when you actually try to make music with it. It's a pretty different thing, testing a library out on its own and writing with it. This library really knows itself. I could put it more bluntly and say, this flute library is not a super agile thing. It's not built for like soaring high melodic lines that are going to pierce through your mix. But it also is not trying to convince you of that. In fact, anything but. Your experience with production music, I think, has given you, and maybe just this is sort of your intuition in general, is that you've got this really good grip on where to focus in on a piece of music and just ride that. This library has some of that in it. It makes for a really comfortable writing experience. The ways that I was finding myself using this in the demo were almost like a garnish, but not really like a passive garnish. There's so much motion built into it, like specifically the chatter and ethereal patches. I was able to kind of use it as a drum roll. There are parts where the melody sort of drops out and there's like a space before we kind of catapult back into the next statement of the melody line. Chatter worked like it's like a crescendo. It's like a drum roll, but with like tonal flute elements. You can't really fake that unless it's built into the library. And so thank God you built it in. I think, like, in summary, just it really is comfortable to write with. It's a comforting tool. You're not going to spend a lot of time wrestling with this thing or trying to figure out how to use it.
A few months ago, I went to NAMM and I met Cameron, otherwise known as Venus Theory. Incredible YouTube channel, you all know about it. He submitted some work to Piano Book. He was a samplist of the month. He does great sound design, and I was hoping that he would say yes to my request to write a demo. Thankfully, he did. He took the sound and manipulated it and made it crazy, and I love it. Check it out.
So, as someone who makes a lot of noise with a lot of different stuff, I think the thing I've learned over the years is that the hallmark of a good sound is it's something that you can immediately hear in a track, like in your head. As soon as you play something, you're like, okay, now we're somewhere. And I think you've done exactly that with this library, which is very hard to do. So, my compliments to the chef. I think what makes this library great, though, is it's not just another flute library. Not only is the sound really evocative and interesting, but it has a lot of versatility in some surprising ways. It layers great with other stuff. It can be kind of a standout solo element, or you can use it as sort of a starting point to get kind of weird with, because it has such an interesting texture and quality to it. One of the things that's always fascinated me with sound is this idea that you can distill emotion into a sound, which is weird because, you know, a flute playing a G innately isn't much of anything, but in this case it kind of is. Playing that G says something and it makes you feel something, and that is incredibly hard to do intentionally, and I don't know how you've captured so much feeling in such a simple instrument, but it's incredible to work with. What I really enjoyed about making my demo track with it was that as soon as I played it, I felt something, and I knew that there were unlimited directions I could take this. And that was the nice thing, is sometimes you get some of these instrument libraries and, you know, it's a thing that does one thing, so it's kind of suited to one sort of niche-y thing, but this is a really flexible library, so it was cool to push it into the territory of almost being a synth pad, but it's also a bass in the intro section, and then it becomes this really bright lead element, and then with a bit of distortion, suddenly I have this epic cinematic atmospheric drone, and that's such a cool thing from a flute library. Of course, it doesn't hurt as well that it's also really pretty to look at, and I think that's important. It's something that invites you to just start using it, so shout out to Hunter for doing such a great job with the UI. But yeah, my hat's off to you, John. This is a fantastic library, and therefore I deputize you with the power of the stash.
I worked on this flute sound for years. There were times when I was very happy with what I had. There were times when I wasn't very happy. Then I'd make some breakthroughs and I was happy again. And then in the end, with some help from my friends, I got it where I wanted it to be. But even then, I wasn't sure if what I had would be good. And then when I sent it off to my friends and I heard them approach it in a totally different way and write styles that I had never even considered writing, well, that's a really cool moment for a samplist. I really don't like to bother people. I know how much time it takes to write a track, but I pestered these guys and they sent me songs and videos, and I'm grateful that I have this all packaged up in this video, if only for me. But if you like what you hear, if you find the sound inspiring, please go check it out at pianobook.co.uk. I'm right there on the front. It's 20% off for unlimited time. I'm not sure how limited that time is, so get it quick. Thanks for everything. The support has been overwhelming. Very grateful. Take care.